of this kind of thing both here on Thomas Sheridan Arts and on Open Source Occult TV, the other channel. Now this one here, I did one yesterday morning at the forest by the beach, and I had to take it down. Two reasons. It was just my train of thought was totally overtaken by meat golems who showed up in mass to try and ruin it. Being Sunday morning, these malignant meat golems, Abrahamics, are fired up by their demon Jehovah, whom they worship at its height on Sunday morning, and so they can't behave themselves, they can't help themselves. And what was a good video about groves and the idea of spiritual sanctuaries for pagan archetypes, it was completely destroyed, and I got taken off on tangents where I didn't want to go, especially on that channel, which is not, no political stuff should go into it. I've cut the chat off here so you can say whatever you want, I don't see it. And also the chat was fun at first, but it's also distracting when malignant meat golems and Abrahamics, and there's also another issue I'm having. I don't think I'll be doing any more videos from that wood by the beach anymore. I think there's something going on. It happened in the wake of the video. It happened in the wake of the video I made about the aliens and demons being the same thing, and there was all sorts of, many people noticed very strange manifestations that happened around behind me. Things were jumping around and stuff, and also there was a terrifying experience. Also, I think when I saw that the lumberjack shed was burnt down, that was kind of like, I used to sit there with a couple of cans of cider and bring my sketchbook and just chill or read, and that's kind of gone now. There's also a problem I think I'm having with a dark cult in this part of the country. There's a group out of Galway who started out a few years ago as a harmless kind of satanic cult. Well, I shouldn't say cult, but they were just a group of people just got into Satanism, and something went wrong. I've heard that they got big into drug dealing, and they're now a kind of a sort of like, they call themselves, I don't know what they call themselves, but they're worshipping the Crom Dove, which is the Christian, what's the word? Disparaging of the Crom Cruach. But they've gone sort of like, so they're kind of like Christian again, which is kind of weird, like dark Christianity. They've gone that way. So I don't want to get on their bad side, but I think it was them who probably, after seeing my video for a laugh, went up to the wood and burnt down the lumberjack shed. I don't know if they're sending me messages or they're having a laugh. They've never given me any problems before, but I'm not bothering them, and hopefully they're not bothering me. But I think they've kind of moved on the area, and the wood has become left hand. For whatever reason, maybe I caused it, I don't know, with that video about the aliens and the demons being the same thing. That morning, the stars were in the right, moon was, whatever. That's that video. This is another video. Okay. The idea, and this is something that's very important, I think, for getting people who have been destroyed by Abrahamic religions, in particularly Christianity, and want nothing to do with any kind of forms of spirituality. You don't have to necessarily go start wearing a robe and carrying a staff and calling yourself, sanguine, a Hazelwood, Lord of the, all this kind of cosplay druidism or cosplay Wicca or anything. There's other ways to express your spirituality. Like when a fucking fly goes down, the fucking mosquito goes into your mouth. Now, there's other ways of expressing your spirituality. Chaos magic and Philip Hine, the rest of us, taught us that we move and float with the times, that the magical process and the spiritual concepts is something that flows in the time. So therefore you can just as validly worship a star, I mean a Hollywood star, as you can anything else. And of course Crowley taught us all about this, and every man and woman is a star, and of course he created the 20th century. Now I want to talk about the idea of space travel as a form of spirituality. Now at first this may seem very strange and very odd, but believe it or not, the thing that drove cosmology and the cosmonaut ideas in Russia and the Soviet Union was very much based on a kind of a weird secular atheistic religion. It was called Cosism. And the idea was that, okay, there was no God, there was no spiritual force on the earth or in space, but space travel could compensate through things like space exploration and radio telescopes, where we would live forever among the stars. The idea was that, any message we send into space, be it a probe, a rocket, or a satellite or radio transmission, it's eternal. It goes into the cosmos and it becomes a kind of a god, a kind of a techno god, a techno Christ has risen. And this idea is what really gave birth to a lot of things like transhumanism, came from that. Now, that's a bad way of looking at it. Another way of looking at it is, okay, you know my feelings about the Apollo missions. I believe they went to the moon for lots of reasons. The main ones being, it's easier to go to the moon than it would have been to create that conspiracy or a hoax that, that they pretend they went. And all the stuff about Stanley Kubrick, it's all pure nonsense made up by people. There's absolutely nothing behind that. They could not have faked it to that level. Secondly, there's other evidence that's indisputable, like radio telescope, shortwave amateurists who were listening to them and triangulating the signal from the moon's surface itself. And also, the biggest one of all is the behavior of the astronauts after they came back, and also why we have not been into deep space ever since. There's been no deep space human exploration since Apollo, because I'll put the link to the video below about the shamanistic aspects of space travel, interstellar space travel or interplanetary space travel. They became gods. They went into a domain they could not understand. This is why Neil Armstrong, and I used to hate when people used to say, oh, he's a bastard, he's faking that he went to the moon. That man was deeply affected by the experience, as was many others. And you have even the bad effects like Buzz Aldrin. Buzz Aldrin became an alcoholic reclusive, and people say, oh, it's because he was living with the guilt of not going to the moon. No, I think because he was a hard-nosed. You watch movies like The Right Stuff, you read the book, it's a very accurate portrayal of those guys. They were hard-nosed scientists, engineers, and military men, and they weren't ready for what happened. To the degree it was. Now, I'm going to talk about that, but they were ready at some level because they were nearly all Freemasons. Now, you have to basically be a Freemason to get ahead in the US Air Force anyway, or in the Navy. Now, the thing is that let's talk about NASA as a spiritual idea. Now, that sounds amazing to people, that the idea that NASA could be a spiritual institution. I would actually argue that it's more of a spiritual institution than it is a scientific one or an engineering one. You look at its genesis. Its genesis was definitely people like Jack Parsons at Caltech and JPL. I mean, Parsons was a hardcore devotee of Crowley, and if you're watching that film or the TV series, that brilliant TV series, Strange Angel, that's a very accurate portrayal of what actually went on. Parsons wanted to get to the moon because of a spiritual insight, which was then brought to manifestation eventually through his will, that they were doing like launching rockets inside pentagrams and inside hexagrams and this kind of thing, and this is they were using thelemic rituals to get there. L. Ron Hubbard was also part of this as well. Now, we know how that ended up. I won't spoil it for you if you haven't seen this. If you're watching the series, you don't know what happened to Jack Parsons. But beyond that, the baton was then picked up by the people who brought over an Operation Paperclip. You had Werner von Braun. Now, Werner von Braun himself may not have been directly an occultist from the sort of Germanic Hexan, Black Hexan tradition that spawned the Third Reich, but he was very much in that world. He was a product. He was building rockets because of the Germanic animism and other kinds of occultic forces that took place, the Black Hexan that took place in Germany following and even before World War One. It really took place after the reunification of Germany by Bismarck. I think it was in the 1870s was when occultism really took off in Germany. And the reason why he was building V1 and V2 rockets was not because of Hitler and the Nazis per se. It was because of the spiritual trajectory, pun, that came out that led to into rocket interplanetary trajectories. And that's why he was brought to NASA, and that's why he was a god there among the Freemasons. And that's okay. I mean, this is how it really is. And so you have a situation where the rockets were built, and you have this idea of the Apollo rocket, the name Apollo. We know the Apollo Lodge is the most powerful today, the most powerful Freemasonic lodge in the world at this present moment. The Grand Orient fell into was went a long time ago, but Apollo is the Apollo Lodge, which is very huge here in Ireland, by the way, is very central to the. That's why they were all had Irish names: Armstrong, Collins, and so on. They were all of Irish or Scottish or Celtic descent, the astronauts, because they were seeing Niall Armstrong. I mean, even that name, Neil comes from Niall of the Nine Hostages, the famous Celtic king of Scotland, parts of Scotland and Ireland, and it was all planned. And this Freemasonic, what you call a tracing board, was placed on the surface of the moon long before the Stars and Stripes was ever placed on the moon. So you can be sure of that. Now that's okay. This is how this works. In some ways, it's better that way. And this is their business, and this is their religion, and they use their money American taxpayers' money to get there, in the effort to try and change in a Russian cosmism type way, the psychology of the American people, because of after the assassination of Kennedy, Martin Luther King, and the disaster of the Vietnam War. It was a gigantic magical ritual. It didn't work for two reasons. I think, like many people, Lovecraft himself being a good passive magician, reluctant, I might say, highly reluctant. That's probably what killed him at an early age. Said it all at the opening of the Call of Cthulhu. We're not meant to travel very far. And I think people subconsciously were amazed that a man went on the moon, but also had a kind of a feeling we don't belong that deep in space. And it's something changes, and we do know all about the paranormal experiences that many astronauts on the Apollo mission spoke about, incredible experiences, and this was why they switched to unmanned interplanetary probes with tremendous success, it must be stated. The Viking mission, the Mariner missions, and the specifically the Voyager missions, definitely, and then later on Cassini and so on, they definitely absolutely captured the public imagination when all these incredible pictures from what the planets look like close up came back from space, and landing probes on various planets. It is space travel these days. I doubt if a human being will ever go into deep space. Now, people are going to say, well, what about the Van Allen belt? Well, the Van Allen belt let's put it this way: if you're going to be let's put yourself in a position of you being an Apollo rocket being launched. You have an enormous ritual, the takeoff thing. You have the countdown. You're locked into a cube. You're lying on your back facing towards oblivion. Behind you is the alchemical forces created by Jack Parsons as a result of the OTO and the thelemic rituals of Crowley to launch you up there. You ascend as a god. You become a god, right? You're in an extreme state of intense focus, incredible focus that has to be brought to happen. You have a gyroscope in front of you. A gyroscope, if you look at it, it looks like a geometric magical shape, and that's guiding you to the heavens as a god. You break through into Earth's orbit, and you begin your body feel to light. You're an angel. You've ascended. You're in weightlessness. You're now no longer a mortal on the planet of the Earth, but you're floating like an elemental god, a spirit, an angel. You have transformed. You've transcended in the truest way. You rise up above the Earth's atmosphere. Now, this intense focus on getting to the moon. Let's talk about the idea. I have seen people in Santeria rituals drink whiskey and vodka and drugs, take cocaine and cigars because the entity inside them wanted it, and they didn't get it. They didn't get drunk or they didn't get stoned. They came out perfectly sober. We know that people in magical states can walk through fire, can push steel and things through them. I'm going to suggest that they went through the Van Allen belt, if it's that dangerous as they say it is, in a heightened state of magical intensity, and it didn't affect them. That's what I'm saying. And because it didn't affect the first mission, it didn't affect the others. Apollo 13 is an interesting one. Maybe there was someone on that spaceship who was not primed and ready to go that led to that. That's something that we should look at more deeply. But I'm going to put that out there. That's how they passed through the Van Allen belt. If the Van Allen belt is as deadly as they say it is, these guys came back, and we all seen that famous press conference below, or should I say up there. And yeah, see that cards? This is how fucking uncool I am with this stuff. I only discovered you can go live now, and I can put cards up there that show you videos that are relevant to what I'm talking to. And we have a situation where they became gods. Now that sounds like an incredibly blasphemous thing, but that's what happened. That's why they went the way they did. They became gods. There would be absolutely more sense in venerating and invoking Neil Armstrong as your God than Jesus Christ, because you can prove Neil Armstrong existed. You can prove Neil Armstrong ascended to become a god, right? This was sort of like you can prove that he came back down to earth. He went on a mission to become a god. He went to the moon, right? The moon representing the deep subconscious forces of the human being, came back to earth and was a god. He was a god. And so are the rest of the astronauts. But specifically him, because he was the first one. He's a Christ-like figure that you can actually put your money on and go to the banquet. And so therefore, if you wanted to venerate, if you're doing a magical ritual, particularly in chaos, and you want to venerate a more powerful archetype, well, there's nothing wrong with having a model of the Saturn V rocket on your temple table, on your altar. There's nothing wrong with that. That's a very powerful phallic and symbolic archetype. You could have like burning candles around it. You could have a moon and an earth on one side, a moon model on the other, two globes. You can have that, and you can perform rituals where you are calling down the archetype or the spirit of Neil Armstrong in order to charge your will. This is, you can you could even go and do it in your backyard and fire off rockets. A rocket have a symbolic mass that follows the what happened when they launched the first Apollo rocket. You could have Vestal Virgins, I mean symbolic Vestal Virgins, or this kind of you could have the high priestess come out with the rocket out of a room, just like the rocket came out, follow a processional path, just like the Apollo 5 follow the processional path, place it on the launch platform, have the ritual, the 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, and launch the rocket. And you can invoke the likes of Parsons as well in this ritual. This is chaos. You take what's available and you turn it into a magical force. See, this is the way we will get people back into a spiritual life. These atheists are not going to be interested in people who do cosplay druidism or Wicca or anything like that. They're not going to be interested in people doing anything that looks Christian or anything that resembles a Christian thing. But if you can sort of this is why a lot of them become Satanisms, because the LaVey Satanism offers them a corruption of the Catholic Mass in the Tridentine Catholic Mass pre-Vatican II, and so you have the black host and the transubstantiation of man, and you can have the same ideas brought into others. See, spirituality is something that's been totally missold to the public. It's either Abrahamic religions or it's Vedic religions, Indo-European pagan religions, and that's all okay. Well, not the Abrahamic, you should be getting away from that, but the Indo-European and the Vedic and the Hinduism is all fine, Buddhism, fine. They're never told that you can actually take the real world, things you've experienced, things you admire, you admire. And this is what gives these Freemasons an edge. And this is what makes me so dangerous to people, to the system. This is why they take down my fucking website. It's because I don't sit there doing all this silliness. And I talk to people in spiritual terms, in really insurgency type ways, and in manners that are definitely making people think and switch off into another way of thinking, that you can actually be a spiritual force in this world without having to follow anything else. You could make this your, you could find something else that was very powerful to you, maybe a rock concert. We've all been in the mosh pit, a heavy metal gig, a black metal, anything. You could find that. I mean, there are people out there who are ripe to be turned into this, and Kate Bush is one of them. How, you know, Kate Bush will definitely be venerated as a goddess by women, specifically in years to come. But it should be equally venerated by men, because she's not a feminist icon, and feminists shouldn't be allowed to own Kate Bush's spiritual legacy in the same way that they've done to Wicca. And so this is spiritual chaos, discordia thinking. Take what's in the world. Worship Trump. Worship Trump as a black messiah if you want to. Worship him as a new Lucifer who lights the light of the way and makes all the cockroaches scatter. Worship anything. I mean, I was even back in the 90s when I was starting to first get into chaos. And there was a big hacker scene in New York back then, and it was when I first heard about Raw and McKenna and people like that, and Philip Hine. They used to have like A5 fanzines that were printed on photocopiers, and the hackers back then were big into like hacking phone systems. So things like getting free calls across the United States and international phone numbers through hacking the systems like the ATT and the Mabel system, and also television and radio signals, broadcasting your own TV station, your own radio station, getting around FCC restrictions, and hacking into things like that, hacking into radios and using them for yourself. So like there was, you know, getting into various radio brands, like say the Police radio band, and broadcasting a station on it for you and your friends, and then moving it around in a van. This was magic. This was chaos magic at the time. And in their fanzines, they had this idea of, I first learned about chaos. Now, the first thing I thought of that would make I saw a documentary on PBS about the history of the electric chair. And I thought that the electric chair that would make a phenomenal object of magical and spiritual veneration. Again, it takes humans and transports them into other realms through an alchemical thing of the fire, the electricity, magnetism. I mean, if you want to talk about something that's absolutely a kind of a spiritual or magical idea, it's the electric chair. Lo and behold, I see a Prince video a few months later, and there's Prince in the video mocking a kind of a mass around. He celebrates, I don't know what song it was, an electric chair. Maybe you can put it in the comments below. And that was one of the things that made me realize, fucking hell, this chaos stuff does work, because I was running the idea of a phony pageant of mocking the electric chair. And the idea of Julius and Ethel Rosenberg being the Jesus and Mary, or the Joseph and Mary of the electric chair cult. And it was just purely a joke in my head, an idea I was mulling with. Now, of course, I had no intention of making it real, but I was looking for the ideas through chaos of making something that was powerful and had all the potentials of a spiritual force, and launching it into an idea. And that was one of the first things that were, wow, you know, this chaos stuff works. And so this idea, and you can do with anything. This is why we worship stars. And this brings us back to space travel. The idea of every man and woman is a star. The star on the earth, the star in the sky. We are related through things like astrology. We were created by stardust. We are stardust. We will eventually be taken out by an asteroid or a comet, or the sun expanding. That will just wipe us out one day, and wipe out one day. There's a birth and a cycle, and the bridge between them is the men and women who travel into deep space. So it wouldn't be things like, I often think like when the what you call it, the space shuttles blew up and things like that, it was almost like you're not doing proper magic anymore, and you've lost your magical powers. It's also, you can see where NASA did lose its magical power. It didn't have the same effect on the public anymore. Apollo was the ultimate ritual, and it took the first ever human being that was alive in real time, that the whole world could observe, and transform them into a god. And so you think about that, you remember that, you think about these ideas, and you remember that spirituality is a far bigger thing than just going into an Abrahamic religion or joining a pagan group or anything like that. You can do whatever you want, and you can actually make magic from anything. Watch my other video. Boom! See that? How to practice magic in the 21st century. Take care, and I'll be seeing you a lot more often if you like these videos.